Welcome everyone to Having, where we're all just professionals on the grind. And today we have Vince Pena. And to start off, Vince, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are your parents from? Where were you raised? And how was the area growing up?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I was actually raised in Atwater, and if you say Atwater right now, it's a pretty gentrified area. So you would think that I was raised in a very affluent area. That was not the case back then. Um, yeah, so again, which it was LA. It was actually a predominantly Filipino population in that area. And My parents are from Mexico, and there's an interesting dynamic that I grew up with because my mom's from Mexico City and my dad's from Jalisco and from a rural area. And for those of you that understand that dynamic, there's always some kind of friction between people from Mexico City and everybody else.
All the states have beef for some weird reason, and then we get here and they're like, "Oh, you're from Guerrero. Oh, you're from Jalisco. You're from da da da." It's the most bizarre thing because here in the U.S. we don't have that state beef.
But it's not even a state beef though. So I mean, I think we're actually finally seeing it, and if you and not to go into politics, but if you look at the voting and what has happened recently, you're seeing a lot of rural versus urban,
Right.
and I think that's really what what's played in Mexico, and but because Mexico is more classist, or at least they don't hide it as much, right? It's kind of out in the open.
Oh, it really is.
Um, and I think that's the dynamics that we're starting to see here in the United States, or at least we're admitting to it. Let's put it that way.
No, I agree. And you touched on something really interesting because I think a lot of people from LA in particular have experienced that exact same thing where they grew up in the hood and now it's gentrified. I remember I took a canvassing job for a campaign, and they're like, "We're going to Echo Park. It is so beautiful, $1 million homes." And in my head, I'm like, Echo Park, like we're gonna get shot or like robbed, or I remembered it being infested with gangs and things like that, or watching Me Vida Loca and it's Echo Park, and
Yeah,
right now and go and canvas, and these are $1 million homes now, and it's happened throughout LA, and it's continuing to happen, and it's something that we first generation college students should now look at it through a different lens. I know when I was in high school myself, one of my biggest passions was going out, getting my degree, making money, and then gentrifying the area myself. I'm like, no, I'm going to buy the home that we're renting, flip it, and then I'm going to make $1 million home in South Central LA. And now that I'm in the workforce and I'm out, trying to make money, I'm never going to catch up to even buy a house in the hood because it is so expensive now.
yeah. So there's quite a bit of things going there, and as you know, I have been in real estate for some years, and I've done that among many other things. But it's interesting because you're right, back then, and as your audience might know, I'm a little older than you are. Back then, the thought was that yes, I was going to buy a home, and so let me go back a little bit to my parents' history. My parents owned their own home, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
so
Do
they
they still
bought
own?
their well, let me go into it.
Okay.
They
All right.
bought
Yeah.
Yeah, they bought their home in Atwater in sometime in the 80s for 75,000.
Wow. Unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, that same home, and because I've checked on it, just for sentimental reasons, right? It now is worth over $1 million, which is ridiculous.
Wow.
Um, but that's the whole thing, right? So for me, my parents were able to purchase their own home. It was in Atwater. That's where I grew up. And you're right. I kind of grew up with the same first thought that, hey, I'm gonna buy a home, and it's just gonna be something that I'm gonna be able to do. And for the record, I was a homeowner. I actually bought my first home when I was 27.
Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately, I like to say I'm a victim of what happened of predatory lending and all that. So that very much is something that I very much lived and experienced during the 2008 debacle.
And to kind of go back into your parents and your upbringing, being first gen, do you feel like your parents influenced you, whether it came to being conservative, machista, religion, kind of dive into that because you are quite Americanized for a first gen. I know some first gen that are conservative and they're anti-choice, or the men are very machista. I don't think you are machista at all.
Well, let me, because it's a very interesting dynamic, and I think one of the only reasons that I think this way, or that I kind of grew up this way, is well, we were three boys, right? So it was myself, my younger brother, and then my youngest brother, and with that also I had a cousin that came from Mexico to live with us. He came to live with us from junior high through high school, and then I had a very close friend who I literally consider my brother, and I introduce him as my brother. And so we have kind of this dynamic of five guys growing up, and because we had the dynamic, and there was no girls in our home, so we were expected to clean, to do things, the laundry and things like that. Aside from that, we were very much expected to help and be handymans, and do all sorts of things that we should do, that's traditional male roles, right?
Right.
But the female roles wasn't something that was, oh, you're not going to do. There was nobody else doing it. It was my mom, and we all had to pitch in. But my father was pretty progressive. I remember sometimes my mom having to work on weekends, and you'd see my father mopping, and he
Right.
wouldn't he wouldn't have a problem, and he would mop, and of course he would make us do something, and cleaning the restroom and doing all that was just part of growing up. So that's one thing where I wasn't. Yes, we had technically gender roles per se, because I very much saw it in my home, but it wasn't something that it was. Oh yeah, if you don't do this, you're not a man, or that wasn't pushed. So there was something that was very open in my household, and I didn't really necessarily have, or adhere to, or pretty much think about it.
Right.
Then the other factor is I have girls. So
Exactly. You're a girl dad.
no, I'm a feminist, because I mean I believe that they're entitled to everything that anybody else is entitled. So I mean
That's
that's also.
amazing. And you touched on something that is interesting. So both of your parents worked when they came to the US. Did they come with a Mexican education? Did they come to school out here? What was their first job when they came to this country?
Yeah, unfortunately they didn't. My dad actually kids, but it's true. He said he learned to read under a tree, and I didn't have the fortune, but I know my brother actually went to El Rancho, right, to and saw the
Right.
tree he learned to read under.
With the books right under it too.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, and he would tell us that he literally had a notebook that was strung together through with string. And I think he got the most basic type of education. You're gonna read, learn some arithmetic, and you're done. And my dad's life is actually interesting, but I'm not gonna go too much into it, because he did, and I'm not gonna say that it's special, because I understand that everybody's parents actually, in particular if immigrants, and I'll say that's why we're here, had some kind of complications with their life, right? And my mom came to United States when she was 16,
Mhm.
and I will share this part though. She arrived here when she was 16. She actually enrolled in Roosevelt High School,
Oh.
and she did one semester there. And then my grandfather pulled her out, and she started working as a seamstress in downtown, and never went back to school, unfortunately.
That's unfortunate. And, this is something that we don't talk about enough because some of our parents did get lucky and they did go to high school and then they started a full career. Where my parents, my dad went to the field and he was also a seamster for a very long time in his life while his brother had a very successful business. And it's just, that fork in the road when you get here and you don't know how much that's going to impact you or your kids once you get there. But I wanted to touch on your military background because you did serve in the Marines, right?
Yeah, 6 years.
And 6 years. And I wanted to know your choice behind that. Did you enlist right after high school, or did you what was that life
Well,
decision for
if you
you?
don't mind, let me go back, and I want to touch
Yeah,
on
go right
something
ahead.
something that you said right before, on the whole parents thing, and education, and what they come, because I truly believe this, and I see it in my life, and I see it among the Hispanic community, and I hate to generalize it, as you know, but I always say that our work ethic betrays us. right?
Yes.
Because as you know, it's always work and do the hardest and work. And I think that's the reason I say it betrays us is because we stop sometimes we don't think about being entrepreneurial.
Mm,
We don't think about education as work, right? And sometimes we define work as only being hard labor, right? And I've
right.
heard it, and if you want to talk about machismo and everything, I've heard about comments, right? You know, if men that have soft hands, they don't work or whatever. And you know what I mean? And
Yes,
it's
yes.
yeah, and I think it's something that really affects the Hispanic community. It's our work ethic that I think unfortunately betrays us to a certain
No, I
extent.
agree. And, if we're going to touch on this subject, I think it's important to note that when our parents came to this country, at least for my parents, all they knew about money and making money with an education was doctor or lawyer. And
Exactly.
when I first declared as a business major, my dad ripped me a new one. He didn't understand what a business major was. He's like, "Oh, everyone's a business major." Like he was downplaying, talking down to me about it.
Hmm.
And later down the line, when I switched over to poli sci, whatever, decided to go a different route, one day he's like, "Man, none of my kids decided to be businessmen." Then he was like in the country, and I was just like, "Bro, you literally chewed me out because I declared as a business." And they didn't understand the pathway outside of either you're going to make money as a lawyer or you're going to make money as a doctor. But when you go to college, you're not told about computer science. You're not told about electrical engineering or being a radiology technician. There's so many different pathways that I could have taken, but I'm gonna be honest, I had no idea even existed until I got to college or until I graduated college. And so that's something that this is why I created this, platform, because it's exposing things to people who aren't having these conversations because you are first gen or because your parents weren't educated. Our parents expected us to get to college, but no way were they able to help us with homework. No way were they able to help us with a FAFSA or even, our SATs. And so it's one, biting the bullet and getting through it and really just navigating that like life, you one of your biggest life choices on your own as a young high school student. And so it's I would do things a little differently now, but
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny, and I think you've heard me touch on this before. And there's a particular phrase that I like to use, and every time I have a chance to say or talk to somebody about it, but I call it the culture of education, right?
Mm,
And there are certain way of thinking that that a person has when you have an education. It doesn't matter whether what country it is. There's this particular li- what can I put it, a light or something that turns on with that formal education, right? And so what happens is our parents come to this country without that culture of education. And I'm not saying everybody, but at least
right,
from you and I
right,
think
right.
I think that's safe to say. um and they understand that education is important, but don't understand to what extent, don't understand how to achieve it, right? So what do they default? They default to what they know, doctor and lawyer, because
Right.
that they lack the culture of education. Understand that, hey, any formal education is going to simply improve your life. And that's one thing that I think as Latinos, we even many of us who've already achieved an education don't don't realize this. An education is really not for you to have a career. An education is for you to have a better life.
Mm,
That's really the goal of education. And if you look at the way that formal education, when we're talking about university and above, right, the way it's set up, it's progressive. It's really set up for you to have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. That's really the way they teach school. That's really the progression. Obviously, with that, there comes more benefits, right? That you are offered opportunities because there's certain expertise you learn. There's critical thinking, and then the other part that this is a little, I guess, unknown secret that nobody really talks about. And I had this conversation with my son. The reason education is important, or why people I think my dog's going crazy. The reason I think education, people appreciate education is not so much because you achieved the degree or or the training that you got per se. It's because you proved that you can undertake a particular task, stick with it for a number of years, and then achieve your ultimate goal. And if nothing else, if you got a degree in anything, and I'm not going to put down any degrees because,
Right.
but if you got a degree in anything, if nothing else, that's what you proved. You proved that, hey, you were able to take this, and you were able to achieve. And that's, I think, why employers value that degree sometimes, and not so much for what you learned.
You know what is key about an education and looking back more than just a degree, right? Because I would say right now I'm getting my master's to check off a box for my career. It is not to enhance, and yes, of course, to enhance, but also more so to check off a box so that I do qualify for positions. But an education is networking your butt off at every single department. Do not limit yourself to your major. Talk to every single person on campus, every single professor on campus, join every single club, and also monopolizing on the internships because they want college students and only college students. Good luck getting an internship once you graduate and you're in the real world.
Yeah.
This is the time where you intern for NBC, you intern for, Fortune 500, and you get your foot in the door and you kick it open when you have that opportunity. And I think maximizing your education and your experience in college is what you need to do when you're thinking about the bigger picture of what you're trying to extract from this degree, right? If you're at Stanford, you need to be shaking everybody's hand, adding everybody on Instagram,
No, no,
TikTok, whatever you need to
it doesn't
do.
even have to be Stanford. You and I went to Cal State LA,
Right.
and I love it, and I will always praise it.
Same.
Right. And but I think you touch on something that's very important. And I had a conversation about this with a professor at Cal State LA, somebody
Mhm.
you and I know.
Yes.
Um, and it was interesting because one of the biggest feeders to Cal State LA is the LAUSD. And so we started talking about this kind of conversation, and what he sees in students, what is the biggest some of the biggest obstacles that he sees for students. And he mentioned that for and I mean, and I'm not disparaging LAUSD, but this was just what the conversation entailed. He said that what happens is you have a lot of students who, through their high school career, simply went through by not getting noticed, right? You didn't call
Mm,
attention, and they enter the university, particularly in this situation we're talking about, Cal State, with that same mindset, right? Don't look at me, don't call me, don't
right.
I don't want to participate. I'm just getting through. And at that level, again, regardless of what university it is, you could no longer do that. But I go back. That goes back to the culture of education.
Mm,
We have first generation students who are now navigating high school, maybe the first in their family, which, I mean, like, yeah, my immediate family, my parents, I was the first one to have a high school diploma, right? So there are many people like that who
right.
navigated through a school system like that and got through just by keeping your head down. And that's the culture you have. That's the culture that got you through, and that's your survivor skill.
That's,
And unfortunately, it's really not the skill that you want to be that you want to have,
holding on
to
to.
your point. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, you really have to shed that shell, and the way to maximize your education is not necessarily just by grades, but by taking everything in, like you said. And part of it is networking and talking to the
You know
person
what? You know
next to
what I
you.
would add to that is self-improvement. If you're able to assess yourself and you know you're shy, you know you're not good at public speaking, even if you're a sociology major or a women's studies major, you're eventually going to have to be an activist and be out at protests, rallying people together. You're going to be dealing with hundreds and thousands of people, doing cases. And that interpersonal skills that you have, that you develop within yourself, is something that you need to self-assess and improve as you're going to class. Don't go take a speech class because it's a requirement. Take it and really try to learn from it. I think if I would redo my university again, I would definitely be out doing more presentations, working on my vocal skills, and really projecting. And that's that we're already really vocal. Like every professor knew us when we took a class. But again, we could have just been elevated to like the 10th degree, right? And just been really polished when we graduated. And that's something that if you're listening, make sure that that's something at the top of your list. Even if you're at the beginning of your career, if you see that there's something to improve, write it down and have that be a focus for
So
yourself.
yeah, so I'll share what I share with my children, and one thing that I tell them is that if you know how to speak, you could conquer the world.
Yes,
And you could look at point to many world leaders who were able to do that, good and bad, honestly, because they had this what I call it, I want to call it a skill, but almost a talent, or had command of an oratory presence. I think that that's important. But the other thing is, and now we're talking more about career, it could
right,
considerably limit you. I'm now in a position where I do have to present. I have to present to boards. I have to present to the public. I have to present just to my peers, right? I have to present findings or whatnot, and just even to my bosses. And I
right.
had to know how to be articulate, present my idea, and get it across. And not being able to do that would definitely hinder me, and I see it even in my particular employment. I see where some people are hindered by that, and it's unfortunate, because having that expression or being able to express yourself that way is just going to continue to open doors.
No, I agree. And I think at least when we were younger, it was a negative, like, oh, why are you trying to talk white? Or why do you talk like that? And I think that happened in a lot of minority communities, right? Especially if you're coming from the hood and you are, using a $100 word, right? You're building your vocabulary because you're reading more. If you want a professional job, you have to have that professional decorum within your speech, within your presentation, within even your fidgeting habits. Like you need to just be able to compose yourself at all times. And that's nothing to do with you trying to be someone else that you're not. It's you developing your professional skills that shouldn't be misconstrued into anything else. Because at the end of the day, if you want to be a CEO, look at how all of the CEOs in your favorite organizations are acting. Emulate that because that's the person that you need to become. That's something that I do. If I see someone and I love the way they're um, presenting themselves, they're speaking, they're emulating. I'm like, okay, this person's has a high level of vocabulary. Let me go ahead, pick up a dictionary and try to learn 2 new words a day or a week, whatever a realistic goal for that is. But I do want to sort of revert it back, right? Because we did mention you were an older student when we met you. I
Yes,
get
yes,
to Casa de Ley, and Vince has kids, and I think we were both transfers from the college
yes, that's
system.
correct.
Where did you go? I went to LACC. Shout out to LACC. Where did you go?
I went to PCC, Pasadena City College. Go Lancers.
Hey, there you go. And you know what? Just to kind of touch on this, listen, if you didn't get into your dream school, go to community college and transfer into that. Like you could really go wherever you want. You don't have to waste your time. You can get all A's and transfer. I've seen people transfer to USC, transfer to really big schools from the community college district. But I wanted, oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was gonna say, but let's keep going, because I did have something on.
We can always jump back and forth. It's all right. We can go on 1,000 tangents. So when you want to touch back to whatever that was, just hold on to it for
Yeah,
a
no,
moment.
I'll hold my tongue on that one.
Yeah, hold your tongue. Because yeah, I mean, hey, you might just be someone that says no, go straight to university. Don't waste your time.
I do
But
actually, I do, and I'll tell you why. And again, it goes back to this culture of education, right? And I'm talking about experience, and it might just might be my personal experience, right? Because there's nothing wrong with community college, and honestly, for me, some of the best professors and some of the most influential professors in my life were at the community college. But and I was having this conversation, oh, actually, with my daughter. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is at the community college level, you have some of your peers are still deciding whether they want to continue with education,
right,
right? And at a university level, as you know, the conversation is about just simply achieving the degree and what you're going to do after, and if you're going to do your master's. Sure, the conversation's a little bit different, and the reason that's important is because your peers become your support system as much as your family could have. But again, and now I'm speaking personally, if you're coming from a family that doesn't have the culture of education, as I mentioned, and
right.
you're coming and you graduate high school, going into a community college, and you don't know how to navigate the educational system, the community college could be a trap, right? You're not having the correct guidance. You might not be having the correct guidance. You don't might not know what you want to do. You might not even know if you want to finish school. And so people get trapped in community college. I want to say that I did it for a while. I want to say some people did it. You know, you don't realize some classes are transferable. You don't even know what transferable
Well,
means.
let me combat that and counter that, because if your children did decide to go that route, you would be there to help them navigate that. And you would know exactly what to do to not waste their time. I think a lot of what I saw when I was in community college, including with my sister who was stuck in the system for years, it's you get caught up in making money. You're like, well, let me pick up a part-time job. And then you pick up a part-time job that makes a lot of money, and then you lose focus in school, right? Versus you're a parent. If I were to become a parent one day, I am totally pro the community college route. And I would let them know, like, hey, you go to your counselor, you ask for, the transferable classes. This is the pathway to get to where you want to go, and you're not wasting your time. So if you are in the community college system or you are thinking about it, don't get trapped in the noise around you. And then also, I sat at the front of every single classroom. If you're in a community college, you need to sit in the front row, get to class early, participate, make sure every professor
Mm,
knows
do
your
that in
name. Don't
every
waste your time
class
with
you attend.
that.
But you know what? But you make a good point. But you're also validating my point. Yes, our children could go. It's a viable route. But you and I are already ingrained with the culture of education. We went and we paid our dues and achieved the degrees that we have, and so the culture of education now exists within us. But for all the Latinos who don't, your first generation, you have a father who learned to read under a tree, a mother who did never finish high school. They can't necessarily guide you through that. Again, the culture of education is not there. Yes, ve a la escuela, termina la escuela, but what does escuela
Mhm.
mean? What does
But
it
you know
really
what?
what does it
It's a
really
good
mean?
buffer. It is a good buffer. Even if you do waste 1 year, the tr- the timeline of you graduating has been pushed back, right? More people are graduating, doing an extra year. They're super seniors, even at a 4-year university. So by going to a community college, one, you get to spend less money. I think most states now with Obama, you get your first year or 2-year free. You get FAFSA. There's more resources. There's so much money that gets put into the community college system. And heck, I'm not getting sponsored by a community college, but listen, when I am out in the real world, now that I have experienced it, or even the people that I have talked to that have transferred to community college, nobody cares. And guess what? If you did poorly on your SATs, you don't have to I mean, now they're not doing SATs anymore, but that didn't have to get transferred now. And I think also you and I had a negative stigma going into community college, because I know when I was in high school, everyone's like, you're going to community college. I worked hard so I can get into a UC, because I didn't want to be the one going to trade tech. I didn't want to be the one, at a CC still seeing people from high school. But now I feel like it's changed. But this could be a whole conversation.
No, no,
Almost.
we could go into this. We could go
Right.
into it forever, because you're right. And but see, for me, and this is maybe it was just naive or staying plain stupid. My parents say, hey, you could go to PCC. It's a college, and I said, yeah, I
Mhm.
can go to PCC. Why not?
Right.
And then I remember seeing my peers like just going crazy. I'm like, what are you guys going? Why are you applying to this? PCC's right there. It's college. Why are you doing that? And I did go in and I did start. Um, but I think that's the part, right? And for me, that's the danger is that you start there and you start with you don't have the same atmosphere that you do at a university.
No, I,
This
I agree. I agree. There are pros and cons, and there are a lot of, sketchy things that occur at a community college, even at the administrative level. I
hmm
was held back a year, held back, I say, because I had wasted an extra year,
hmm
because I went to a counselor. I was ready to transfer, and he didn't tell me the applications were due the next day. He
Yeah.
was like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Do you want to be a lawyer? You know what? Go to the library, look up an LSAT book, and sit there and really think about it. So I'm not going to say that they are like these bright angels ready to just save your day if your life is a mess when you're in high school, but there is a way to strategize your community college experience so that you are amongst your peers that are challenging each other to transfer. They're not trying to waste their time there.
And I think that's the key. Let's, and this goes really at and anywhere, right? You have to ask questions. You have to associate yourself with the right people,
Right.
and you have to really dig about everything. And this is at community college. This is at a state
Everywhere.
college. This is
Mhm.
at a prestigious college. You have to want something and have to ask and dig and go beyond your comfort level, right?
Right.
If you're at a community college and you have questions, you ask your professor, you ask your counselor, you ask the person next to you, and then you keep asking again. And truthfully, you do that every quarter, every class. And and but you, and and that's the thing, you can't be shy about it, because if you don't come from a place of culture education, people who didn't work with the FAFSA, who don't know about entrance exams, who don't know about any of that, about transferring, you're not going to get the guidance that you honestly need, right? And you're going
Right.
to end up doing these pitfalls that there's no real reason for these pitfalls. um but you have to find to a certain extent, if you could find a mentor who's going to guide you through that, that's probably the best extent. And then again, I repeat, that goes beyond just community college. This is could be at any level, and even now at a professional level, right? Because there's things that we learn on the professional level.
Right.
And let me circle back to something you said interesting, and this is kind of a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah. Go
off
ahead.
topic, because you were talking about speaking and the way you speak, right? And I don't want to say that I've got the perfect pronunciation, or that I have a good manner of speaking, but let me tell you, you're right. When I was growing up, you were kind of shamed the way you speak. So I
You
mean,
were.
obviously, yeah. So to a certain extent, you start picking up slang, which is okay. Everybody could speak in slang, but then for many of us Latinos, there's something that I refer to, and I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody. What I refer to as the barrio accent, right? And
Mm,
there's a
yes.
certain way, a certain accent that even though you're born here, you speak with. And like, wait a minute, why do you have an accent if you're born here? Um, and I learned the hard way. Before, and I'll get into the military part. Before I went to the military, I was actually working in a law firm, and I was accustomed to speaking in a certain manner. And then I was assigned to answer the phones for this law firm, and for whatever reason I couldn't get the pronunciation of the law firm correct, or somebody didn't like the way
Oh,
that I pronounced it. Yeah, and they literally took me off the phones. They called HR. I remember the phone call. They said, they asked me who this was, and I told them who I was, and they said, "Hey, transfer me to HR." So I transferred them to HR, and a few hours later, I was just taking off the phones.
you know what? And nobody looked me up on LinkedIn, but one of the companies that I worked for, I was told by my manager, there's a system. It's the person on top, manager, and then the person they supervise, right? So I'm down here. I got hired as a receptionist. They had a receptionist there for like 10, 13 years. And one of the first things my manager told me when I got hired was, when I was told to replace the position, I was told, make sure you don't hire anyone with an accent. I met the receptionist before me because she trained me for one day, and I knew exactly what they were talking about. And I was like, wow, this
Hmm.
is so fucking crazy. Like, one, if you think racism doesn't exist today in corporate America, you are wrong. I had to learn that the hard way, and we can jump back once we do start talking about our work experience. But I can relate to that. And I felt so bad for her because the company was powerful and the people in the company were very powerful.
Hmm.
And you really cannot, um, sometimes you do have to put your head down, unfortunately. And that's what happened to her. And I was sick to my stomach. I was sick to my stomach with that. But guess what? I also needed a job. So I had to swallow it. As much as I thought I was like this activist, this person that would never tolerate, I had integrity, would never work for a company like that. Here I am, months out of college without a job. And this is the first thing I land. And, I wasn't told this until later on. But even then, I don't have perfect English. I still can't say decisions. I don't know why. I just can't say decisions for the life of me. So I try not to use it. But it's true. And it's funny because I remember I used to be a youth leader at my local church, and all of the kids did speak in that barrio slang. And they were like, "Oh, why do you speak that way? Like, you speak different than we do." And I'm
Hmm.
like, I don't know, read a book. But I also had a mentor. At 8 years old, my mom put us in a mentoring program, and she was this white woman who I love, Suzanne. Shout out to Suzanne. And when she would come and like visit me, she would correct me with every single pronunciation. If I pronunciated a word wrong, she would correct me. And at first, I thought she was being racist. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm Mexican. Like, of course, I'm not going to pronounce everything correctly. And I also, I'm very prideful and I'm very like driven, right? And so I would practice our conversations. And if I stumbled on a word, I would correct myself until I had the pronunciation that I felt that she wouldn't correct. Later down the line, I realized how beneficial that was.
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
you know what? Now there are, except for decision, and I think that's because of my tongue. I don't stumble across words, but because I make it a point to do that. And that is that mentorship impact, influence. She wasn't doing it because she was racist. She was doing it because she was an anchor and she knew that her pronunciation and being articulate was important in the real world. And she was passing on that knowledge. And I pass that on to everyone that I speak to. And it's important. It's important.
No, it is important, and I think sometimes we get hung up on that. That, oh, that's the way I speak. It's part of my ethnicity, and I don't want to necessarily agree with that. I think there is a level of professionalism, and you could say there it could be race or whatever, but the thing is that it's competition, right? And so if everybody's playing with certain amount of tools, you need to bring those tools to the table. Right,
Right.
and maybe you adapting or whatnot, but it's still part of those tools that you need to bring to the table. And I'll share with you. I was in a separate job, and I had already gone through years of trying to correct my pronunciation and the way I spoke, and particularly when I how I spoke over the phone. My phone voice is typical to what you're hearing right now, but it's completely different. And I remember, I've had this interaction with this one person at the company and in face to face, and then once she called me on the phone, and I answered over the phone, and she asked me, "Who is this?" And I said, "Oh, it's me. It's Vince." And she said, "This is not you." I'm like, "Yeah, this is me. This is I'm speaking." She's like, "Oh wow." She's like, "You sound so completely different over the phone." But at that point, I was dealing with executives at major companies, and so the way I came across and who they spoke to mattered. None of them, I didn't meet the majority of them, but over the phone, these are sophisticated people running major companies, so they want to make sure there's and yes, there might be an element of racism if there, if you want to say it, but at the
Right.
same time, I gotta default to a level of professionalism. We have to use the tools that are played in the game. I want to put it that way.
I would agree and disagree because I think, unfortunately, you can be the most qualified, overqualified employee with, an accent, and you're going to get discriminated, which hundreds and thousands of people do every single day. And it's unfortunate, but it's also like if you know that this is how dirty it is, because you do have to be political. You don't have to be a poli sci in politics to know that unfortunately you have to navigate the workforce in corporate America or any company that you work for, um, and play the game. You have to
Yeah,
play the game.
but let me clarify, because we're talking about accents, and I'm not talking about an
Yes,
accent whether you're born in another country. I mean, you can't help it. Those are things that just happens because you spoke another language. But and mind you, I spoke Spanish before I spoke
right,
English, right? But at the same time, I think if you're born here, you do to a certain extent have that responsibility to make sure that because you do have that step, and you do have that opportunity to speak in a professional manner and improve the way you communicate, right? We can't. My teenage self is the way I spoke, and mind you, not necessarily with the slang, would not be able, and I wouldn't sound professional in a meeting where I'm presenting data or information, right? Um, and truthfully, there's also a level of confidence that is attributed to your audience, and then it also depends who your audience is, and that's where we
right.
start getting into all that, right? But yeah, but let me I don't want to take over your interview, of course, but going back to the military part, because I think that is that
Yeah,
is
no,
part of
I
it.
want to talk about it. That's a whole conversation that I definitely want to tap into. So, what was your, choice there in going? Did you go right after high
No,
school?
no. So
Or
I
what was
I
that?
always find that funny because um I was actually 20 when I joined the military.
Oh, at least you're
Yeah,
young.
20 going on 21, and I was going to community college. I had done already 2 years at community college. I was working part time at a law firm. I was going to be an attorney. That was my goal, you know. Um, and my brother, who's 3 years younger than I, was the one that was looking into the Marines, and he kept talking to me about it. And y'all, they do this, and you know,
He
my, oh, that
recruited
sounds,
you.
yeah, I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty good.
Sounds
And so when
amazing.
people ask me why I joined the Marines, I mean, and you might hear this from other Marines. I joined to blow things up. I mean, really, it was for the experience. Honestly, it was for the experience.
What experience?
Growing up, okay, if you want to go back to the whole macho thing,
Let's do it.
growing
Yeah.
growing up, I that's the one thing that I always played. Always played war. You always saw these movies on TV, and particularly in the era that I grew up
Top
with
Gun.
Rambo and John Claude Van Damme and all
Yeah.
these guys blowing things up, and Bruce Willis and all these things. It looks what we call high speed, low drag. So that was always an appeal, right? And I'm like, and so I'm seeing this. I'm getting the opportunity to do that. I'm like, yeah, man, I want to shoot machine guns and and bazookas and all that. That sounds like fun. And then what? You're gonna train me to do something else? Well,
I get to travel, right?
yeah,
All
yeah.
the
So
benefits that come with
so and then
it.
they tell you about the benefits and all that. And so yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm gonna get to play with helicopters because I was a helicopter mechanic for those people out there. And I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. Excuse me. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And that's really what I did it. That's really what I did it. And so then I did 2 years active, and then I did 4 reserve. Um, and when I came out of my active during
Well,
my active,
hold on. Before
uh huh.
you mention that, as you're telling the story, I also want you to talk about your career within your Marine experience because I think that's also something that maybe someone who is going to enlist, you might want to think like, do you wish you would have gone a rank higher? Talk about that a little bit as you're going into
Yeah,
the story.
so for me it wasn't a bad experience, but I do tell people you had to be cautious, right?
Okay.
At least when I was there, it was very much a boys club. If you weren't one of the alpha males, if you weren't dirty in the sense that you're not willing to get dirty, you're not willing to put up with things, and you're not willing to get yelled at, and you're not willing to yell back or certain things. And truthfully, it's just a big alpha male club.
You can't be a
uh
beta. No
you
betas
can't
in
you
the
can't
Marines.
because if you're, at least when I was there, I don't know,
Right.
times have changed, right? There was unfortunately people who just, for whatever reason, didn't subscribe to it, right? And I always told people the Marine Corps could be a very lonely place
Mm.
because you're just no longer fitting in. So you're no longer friends. You're not longer considered for
Interesting. Very
for
clicky then.
clicky, yes, but at the same time, because it is that boys club, right? If you're not one of the guys, if you're not drinking, if you're not doing that, then if you, what are you part of,
You're not
right?
cool. Yeah.
You're exactly, you're not cool. And I'm not saying that's a bad part of the Marines, because I you have to consider what the ultimate goal
But it is the
of the
culture.
Marines is. But it is the culture. But I and again, I'm not disparaging it, because I think that culture is important, as bad as this might sound, right? With the
Mhm.
whole toxic masculinity, but you're asking, you want to have a force that ultimately is ready to inflict violence. That's the
Mm.
ultimate goal. Where we could paint it any way you want, but the ultimate goal of a military force is to inflict violence in the best, swiftest, worst case possible. That's what makes an effective military. I mean, this is the brutal truth. So why would you want to have a culture that's anything less than the alpha males that I described? Why would you want to do that? Right? If your military is going to be, truthfully, it's got to be the most violent, it's got to be the fastest, it's got to be the strongest, it's got to be the smartest as well, right? If that's what you want, then that's unfortunately the culture that is, if you, in my opinion, that is required to be successful. Mind you, I'm not a general, right? And so I
What is your
never.
rank? What is your
So
rank?
I finished in E4, which is a corporal, but in the Marines, it's a non-commissioned officer, so yay or whatever.
Okay.
Um, And you know
Where
what?
is that in the rank? Because
It's
I didn't find out until recently what the rank
yeah,
was.
it's it's not high, but it's not low. It's and like I said, I'll default, and all the other if any other Marines are watching me, it's a non-commissioned officer. Okay, so I'll stick with that.
Do
I
you
got my bro.
regret not pushing yourself to get a higher rank?
So listen, right before I got out, it was in 2003, and I was offered an extension, a 2-year contract. I knew we were going to deploy because we were already getting to deploy. Um, but we were already expecting my second daughter.
Right.
Right, and I got offered a stripe, so I would have been a sergeant E5. And they offered me a bonus as well to sign up. Right,
Have you
and yeah, and so
been around the country? There's
so they said they offered me a $20,000 bonus to reenlist, and I said, hey, listen, give me the $20,000 up front, and I will sign whatever you want. And
Mm,
cool. And plus, you pick up sergeant, and you're almost a god there. I mean, not necessarily, but you got more rank and a little more respect, right?
right,
So I'm like, hey, that's wouldn't be bad. I would go into in country at at an E5. It's not a bad deal, and I get $20,000 in the bank. But at that time, I was thinking about the family, right?
right.
If I were something were to happen with me, at least they're going to get 20,000, and whatever my life insurance was, and they told me no, we can't do that. It's 20,000 over the 2-year career, so they'll pay it in every paycheck that you get. They're just going to add that little bit more to whatever. And
Mm,
I'm like, well, I don't want that, because I
right.
mean, yeah, that's $10,000 a year. That's what, maybe $100 more a month. It's 1,000.
Nothing. Right.
Yeah,
No.
$1,000 more, but I mean, still, I mean, it just didn't make sense because if I died the second month into it, they weren't going to see any of it, right? And so
Right.
I'm like, no, I mean, look, I already have a daughter. You guys are not going to give me the $20,000. I know we're going to deploy. I said, no, you know what? At this point, it just doesn't make sense in my life to reenlist.
Well, that
And
makes sense. That makes
for
complete
me,
sense.
it made sense, and but there's a lot of people that came back from my squadron who stayed, who did, and they came back with 2 stripes, and they came back with this rack of ribbons
You
and
regret it
medals.
then? Because that
I don't
camaraderie and
regret it.
that
I
like
don't.
feeling of being left out. Did you get that?
Right. So there's a term that my kids taught me, FOMO. Right. So that was definitely.
Yes. Immense FOMO.
Yeah, well, because look, they came up with the stripe, which is really cool. They came up with all these decorations and these great stories, and you're like, oh man, that's kind of cool. But at the same time, if anything, we know family comes first. So I mean,
That fork in the road for you, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, and yeah, talk about forks in the road. And so no, I don't regret it. Plus, I don't know. I don't know what have been of me. I don't know what have been my mental state. I mean, I know that unfortunately there's some people that suffer from PTSD and
Right.
have issues with that. So I mean,
And
I don't
as
know.
someone, because military is an experience as well, what would you say was the best skill set that you extracted from being in the military? And if you could go back, is there anything that you would have developed yourself more because you had the resources while you were in the Marines?
Mm,
Because you were a feminist going in, you're going into this boys' club, you see this, sort of fraternity type of like ranking because there's politics in the military as well. So, what would you say was the biggest skill set you came out of from coming out of the Marines?
Believe it or not, I think it's a level of confidence, right? So one of the things that the Marine Corps is known for is that they break you down and then build you back up. And there's a level of truth to that, right? There's a little bit of extra swagger you come back with, and if you know
Okay,
me,
Marines.
yeah, well, if you know me,
Yeah, I
I'm not
do
that I'm
love.
full of swagger, but I definitely don't keep quiet. um and so that I think was something that was reinforced. I didn't say it's not like I don't want to say I didn't have it before, but it's definitely it was reinforced. There's a level of confidence that came. Also, there's there's we talked about how going through education you are able to, the reason of education is good is because you're able to accomplish a task. Well, the same thing with the Marines, right? I mean, it does have these basic life lessons, right? Where, hey, there's no such thing as can't, and it becomes real there, right? There's just simply can't. It's got to get done. That's it. There's no way around it. And I think, and I find that that it's missing in a lot of in a lot of the community. I don't want to say community, but it's missing to in certain personalities or in certain in certain situations, right? Where people approach that, oh, I can't figure it out. Well, well, just leave it. Oh, no, no. But truthfully, if you start approaching things in a manner that it has to get done, there's no way around it, then that means, well, shit, I've got to stay up that extra hour. I've got to not go to sleep till it's finished.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whatever getting it done means, you realize that's what you have to do.
When there's a will, there's a way, essentially.
Absolutely, and that becomes very real in the military or in the Marines. At least it did for me.
So let me put you on the hot seat for 1 second because my partner served in the Navy and you did the Marines, and I don't see you pushing your kids to join the military route. Well, hold on, because I have a friend who joined after university. Is this something that you would recommend your children do?
Actually, we kind of briefly had the conversation, and I've always said that if they were to do it, they would do it after they finish their education. I don't have nothing against it, and I think there's definitely a lot of honor in serving. And truthfully, I've even said that I think a year of compulsory service would be a good thing because I think there's people that would benefit from it, and then there's
I
people
agree.
who need who I don't want to sound like this older
Say it.
guy and this generations today they don't get it. But there's a
Exactly.
lot of, yeah, there's a lot of people that do have privilege, that are born with privilege and don't realize, what some people are out there and the sacrifices, right? I've told people, and it's a popular now thing on social media, but it said if you're not willing to break everything down and start all over, that you're not willing to take the sacrifice. Well, it's the same thing. Is that well, I've slept in the dirt, so I know that I could how far I could go. You know what I mean? So
Right.
yeah, I have certain privilege now and certain comfort that believe me I enjoy. Um, but hey, I've slept in the dirt, and in as far as the military is concerned, and with my family growing up, hey, we ate beans and rice porque no había más, right? So
Right.
I've done both. So I know that if tomorrow, that for whatever reason, God forbid, knock on wood, if I would have had to do that, I know I can, and I know I've done it already.
Well, you know what's so funny is my parents were so anti-military, especially American military. My dad, as much as this country did for him, he was just my mom was afraid that we would die in deployment, and it was just a huge fear, so it was never an option. And me being a feminist, I heard about all the crazy things that went on to women in the military. So I wouldn't say I was anti or just like disbanding the military, but I didn't have a positive outlook on them until I got to university. And then I would even go as far as until I met my partner today. And my one of my closest friends, Gladys, she joined after college. And I saw the experiences that they had. And I also saw the benefit. One, you get to travel. Two, you get to build yourself up as an organized, disciplined individual. Granted, not everyone comes out disciplined, but there are some key fundamental traits that you come out of, my partner's so honor bound. Like you don't hear people talking about honor or integrity, and that's something you develop in, the military when you serve for the country. I look at countries like Korea, right, when you're forced to serve. I would go back and even go as far as saying, like, I wish I did, serve some time. And I think it would be an experience that would force you to grow up because you're being pulled away from your family. You're moving, just like the dormitories, right? You have to leave your family. You have to clean after yourself. So you're developing those exact same skill sets that you would if you would be dorming or living on your own, except now you're getting paid and you come out of it, you get to go and receive your education. I think the GI benefits are a little different now, right? I think maybe when you and one of our friends from college went, your kids also got covered with their university or something like that, right? It's very different, but
Yeah, well, I
you
mean,
know,
we could go into that. That's like you could do a whole podcast in that.
yeah,
Trust me.
that could be a whole different
Yeah.
session. But yeah, it's just a different outlook, and it's interesting, and it's good to know because some you might have just said like, no, my kids are never going to come out of it, but that's also going into like you didn't come out with like PTSD, like, or maybe you did. I'm not too
No, no,
certain,
no.
right?
And I didn't, and I think I did mention that. No, I mean, I don't know what PTSD really is. I've never completely experienced it, right? I do have friends who have, and I know that and as a matter of fact, my brother actually saw action, so he actually deployed. The one I told you was telling me about it. We actually went to boot camp together. But what I was gonna say, as far as the military, and this is for me, this when right now, or especially in the last couple of years, where we've had a very divided country. It's a very it's there's a struggle, internal struggle, because yeah, you know what, I think it's safe to say I'm a fairly liberal person,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that I am not patriotic.
Right.
And I kid you not, every
I
time I
love
go
paying
to,
my taxes.
yeah, well, but every time I go to a any type of event and they play the national anthem, I mean, I kid you not, the hairs on my arms. No, they do, and you'll see me stand at attention every time. I will always stand at attention at the national anthem, and God forbid they play the Marine Corps hymn. You could almost have a tear. I mean, and it's real. Fourth of July is one of my favorite holidays. And I think there's a lot to celebrate in this country, and there's a huge reason to be patriotic. And um, I think we have to. I I think the true way to be patriotic is to examine the issues that we've have, right.
Right.
you it's just like it's just like a person. To be the best part of yourself, you need introspection. If you don't take time to have that introspection and ask serious questions about yourself, and question some of your values, and question some of the things that you've done in the past, and come to terms with your past, you're not going to be a good person for anybody else for the future. You got to love yourself before you love anybody else, right? That's
Right.
the coming thing, but that's the truth for the country, right? If you're truly patriotic, you have to come to terms with our history, and with a lot of things that are true, and question them, and then look to improve.
Right. What is the change you want to bring to your country? And we're both poli sci majors, and that's going to segue me into my next question. How did you find your major, your passion? Was it money? Was it like,
Definitely
you
was money.
know, there is the money, there's no money in the public. Unless you're at the top. But how did you come to that? Because you were at a community college, you enlisted, you served some time, and now you're out. So, what made you decide this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? I want to go into the public sector. Tell us about that.
So okay, well, no, that wasn't even the case. So I got
And
out of
what
the
was your
Marines.
major at a community college?
It was actually computer science.
Messed up. You could have been rich.
I could have been fucking rich. Believe me, there's days that I'm like, fuck, man, I should have just kept going. Excuse my
You messed
language.
up. You messed up.
Yeah, no, no. There's days that I definitely say that. Um, but no, no. So I got out of the Marines. I ended up working a I was an office assistant after the Marines,
Okay.
and you deliver mail and whatever the miscellaneous office stuff that you needed to do, and it was at a financial firm. Um, and I'm just losing my train of thought. Yeah, so okay, so I came out and did that, right. Went back to school. That's when it's like the lights opened up. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You mean I took a whole year of non-transferable classes? What do we mean? So then I started taking classes, but as I mentioned, I already had kids and everything. So there was also the need for income, right. And
Right.
and I was able to move up in that company, eventually become an account manager, manage some accounts. Um and and this was in the insurance industry. I was able to get my license in the insurance industry, and then my company got bought out. And from then I moved. I said, "Hey, I'm going to open my own business." I was so very entrepreneurial, and so we said that before I open my own business, I got to get some experience in sales. So I had a life insurance license, and then I got a what they call a property and casualty license. Went to work for Century 21, 21st Century. I forgot what it is. These should be in
Were
phone.
you just applying or you had someone telling you, "Hey, this is an easy pathway to get that skill experience that
Oh
skill
no,
experience?"
no. It was just like, hey, okay. So again, I'm a office assistant, right? And this, hey, what do we do here? Really, that's what it. the hell do we do here? And people
Right.
started describing to me what we were doing here. And okay, and so I started learning more about it, what it the work entailed, and then I started helping out with certain things that the company was doing, enrollments at the time or something. Starting to learn a little bit more, and then finally opened up, applied for a entry level spot, because I already had some foundation to the into the company. I got the spot, worked my way up, and that's, I mean, how I ended up getting into that industry. Um, and so after I, excuse me, I think my dog's going crazy. Um, after I did that, and I said I was going to go into sales, and I did. Went into sales. I got my property and casualty license. I did sales of auto insurance over the phone. And because I'm bilingual, I did it in what they used to call the Spanish. Sorry,
You're okay.
yeah, I did it in what they call it. I used to do. So I sold insurance in Spanish, and
Mm,
that's when my Spanish really got good, because you had to be a little bit more professional, right?
my
And you had to,
Spanish deteriorated. Ugh, something else.
it's like anything, you have to practice it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sold insurance in the Spanish floor for some years, and then I said, hey, okay, I'm ready for to take that leap. Then I took another position at another insurance office, and then I finally branched out. I had my own insurance office, and I did that for a couple of years. And then 2008, 2007 happened, and yeah, that went belly
Right.
up, and yeah, that was a whole different thing. But yeah, I mean, and that was all without a degree at that point. I didn't have a degree at that point. After that, I got back actually into the insurance industry. Well, it was actually deferred comp, but that's a different issue. Um, to work there for 5 years, made it up to essentially manager. I had a team of what, 5 people under me. And same thing, position was done away with. And I found myself, having all these licenses. I even had a 6 and 63, was for mutual funds at that time.
You were trying to make money.
I was,
Very smart.
and it would, hey, I never really wanted to go business. I wanted to be, I like I said, I wanted to be an attorney. That was my goal. That's where I ended up, and I thought that was going to be the rest of my life. And then, like I said, ended up having find myself another job. Um, what year was this? 2012. By that point, I think 2012, 2013. Um, and so just jumped around a couple of jobs here and there. At that point, my mom had passed away. My dad was sick, and we sold our home in Atwater. And I saw how
Oh,
much the agent made
yeah.
on that sale, and I said, "Oh, what the hell? I'm in the wrong industry here."
Right.
And so yeah, I got my real estate license, and went into real estate, and I did that for about 5 years. And real estate's it's hit and miss. I mean,
It's a grind. You also have to just build that up as well, from what I hear.
well, here's the thing, right? And this is true of any self-employment. You have to have a support system, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. And and this is what I tell people: when you're starting off with real estate,
Mhm.
unless you're just that good, or lucky or whatever. And I don't want to say lucky, because there's a lot of successful people out there that put in a lot of work. Um, but consider, you get paid once you make a commission. In between then, there's no income. And then when you make a commission, it's hefty, but you might have gone a month, 2, 3 without any income, right? So you
Right.
definitely need a support system there. And so that just wasn't something that was sustainable for me and then for my family, truthfully, at the time. And so I found myself not knowing what to do, or kind of trying to reinvent myself once again.
Right.
Um, and funny enough, because I did have family and we did need income, I started doing Uber. And yeah, so I know
People make money. People still make money.
I was also I used to also do UPS on the holidays, which was one of my favorite jobs, by the way. So no, I've done a quite a bit of work. But yeah, so I started doing Uber, and I picked up this one guy near Cal State LA, as a matter of fact. And I dropped him off at Cal State LA, and I was and I asked him, hey, how'd you get into Cal State LA? And he kind of gave me this rundown. He's like, "Yeah, I'm 36. I'm going back to school. I'm in my second year." And I'm like, "Well, how you paying for it?" And he said, "Hey, you can apply for financial aid, FAFSA." I'm like, "Oh shit." You know what? I remember I've never applied for financial aid. And that very night, I went back and I said, "Hey, I wonder how far I am from transferring." And so I was able to get my records from PCC, and I came to find out that after 20 years of being out of high school and doing whatever I did in between, I was only
Right.
one class away from transferring.
Shut up. So crazy.
Yeah, so I was like, "Oh my god, I needed one class to transfer for 20 years." So I tell people that my I tell people that my community college experience was 20 years long. Um, so I said, "Oh shit." Okay, so yeah, you know what? I immediately enrolled in that class at PCC. I immediately put in my application to Cal State
Right.
LA. And not only did I take that class, I took a couple of other classes at community college, and I said, "Okay, I'm going back." And again, I went back to community college, and I uh, I said, "I'm going to become a computer science and make some money."
So I want to kind of like step back
Yeah.
a little bit because I think I just had a professor who told the entire class, I went back to school and completed my degree at 55. Much older, much older. And maybe you can speak to some people out there right now who are older and think, I'm not going to go back to school. I look weird. Listen, I was an older student. I'm a little younger than you, but
Well,
I
for
was an older
context,
student.
and let's not beat around it. What I was, what, 42, 43 when
Yeah.
we met, when we met at Cal State LA, right?
Yeah, I think I was on the older side because I was 24 transferring in, and most people are graduating by
Mhm.
24. And so I felt like an older student because everyone else, they can't get into the bars, they don't know how to like compose themselves in class. And so we already felt like older people, but I think the beauty of Cal State LA was it was a hybrid in between people who were transferring in. So it was a commuter school. You had an eclectic range of ages and just people. So it felt like a safe space, but it's also something that you should never give up. Just go back to school and get that degree, especially if you are working towards something more. And something that I wanted to ask you, Vince, was, and I know you have kids, and the political question is, of course, I went back to school for my kids because I wanted to make them proud. But how much was it for you as well? Because you're a very driven person yourself. So was it like, you know what, I need to do this for me, and then my kids are going to benefit from it, or was it I need to push my family forward? What was that thought process behind that?
The bachelor's
Yeah,
was
yeah, the
very
bachelor's,
okay.
and you now, Vince is graduated. Everyone can graduate.
Well,
Yes. You
the
feel
bachelor's was for the family. I mean, yeah, it was definitely for me. And let me tell you, I didn't know how much I wanted it till I actually got into school. Um, my first day of school at Cal State LA, I walked by the sign that's on the main road, and I mean, I could have shed a tear. I honestly could have. I never thought I was going to make it back. And that one was, yeah, I'm going to do it because I want to provide a bigger an opportunity, get an idea of what my children were going to go to, because at that point my son's about was close to graduating high school. And I figured, how am I going to guide him if I don't go through it? um, and that was very much family focused. The masters was on me. That was a very yeah, it was a very
right,
selfish thing to do. That was just me for my ego, because I said, no, I'm gonna fucking do it.
right.
And that was very much selfish. That was very much me. But there's nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that sometimes we have to do things. I hate that it's a cliche that you if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. But if you really are not doing things for yourself, there's going to be very few people out there who are going to do it.
Right,
And I
right.
think that's important. And I think if you do it for yourself and you do it with the right intentions, everybody around you is going to reap the benefits.
No, I agree. And right now, as we're talking about this, I do want to touch base on that stranger, right? Because that conversation changed your life. I love talking to people. I'm very, chatty. I talk to everyone. If you want advice, I'll give it to you, right? Unsolicited advice. But I do want to talk about mentorship, right? Were you ever mentored? You said it, there is a pro, even now as a professional. I know my mentor just I was a sponge. That woman was driven, well spoken, ambitious. that's how I am in the workforce. And that's who I tell people to be. And everything that I learned from her, I share with people. Even now, I try to talk to people who might not necessarily have the official mentor title, but I know I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to ask questions of people in high leadership positions because that's where I want to get to. So I do want to kind of touch base on that with you, where it's like, that person essentially changed your life a bit. So how would you go with like being mentored and now mentoring others or giving that advice to someone that you see is struggling? How would you say, like, should someone seek a mentorship? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
So no, and look, if you have access to somebody who could really guide you and is they're committed to you, and in an unselfish way, take advantage of it, in the most part. And I can't say that I had one person, but I've had the fortune, through my what I call many lives, people who've changed or helped me or made me a better person, right? And when I was in the insurance industry, I had this one boss who he was formerly a teacher. So the way he approached things was very in a teaching manner. But he would tell me, he said, Vince, you can't treat people or have people the same expectation that you have for yourself onto other people. You gotta be show that there's different standards, because I was very much hungry, and in my mind now, I'm an average person, and if I could do it, you should be able to do it too. And then I ended up holding those people to a criteria, and it was unfair to them because I didn't know what they wanted or who it was. So that was very a big life lesson. And going back to this community college, like I said, and I'll answer a question why I went to poli sci, because I was going to be a computer major, and I transferred as a computer major. I changed it in Cal State LA to political science, and I was a English teacher, and she was African American. I'm sure she's still there, and forgive me because I escaped some name, because deserves all the credit in the world. She was very influential. And I say I'm still going to go back, but I don't do it. Anyways, um, she said that she got her bachelor's in history, and she said everybody told me don't do it. What are you going to do with history? And she said, but I loved it. It was my passion. She said, that's what I wanted to do, and I did it. And she said, do things because you want to what is your passion. She said, the money's going to come, you'll figure it
Hmm.
out, but pursue things that are your passion. And poli sci was always something that it was a passion of mine, something I was always interested in. And I said I wanted to be attorney, and said, hey, poli sci is really what I want to do. And so
Right.
I said, you know what, screw it. And I honestly got to Cal State LA, went to the Department of Poli Sci and said, hey, I'm change my major, and I got to change my major from the other side. And yeah, they dropped me on that side and ended up in poli sci. I do sometimes think about it, um, but that's
No
how
regrets. No
that's.
regrets.
But my point being, back to to answer your overall question, is you're not always going to get a mentor. We're not always lucky to have that person in our life who's had that experience, who could even guide you.
Right.
But there are pieces and there are people along the way that if you listen, we'll give you that guidance and we'll share that
Mm.
little bit of thing there. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist by Paolo Coelho, and
Okay.
and I like it because it's a metaphor for life, right? And your personal legend is what it talks about. And if you don't pursue your personal legend, that voice internally falls silent. And in through the journey, and everybody, if you get a chance to read the book. This person who's pursuing and looking for this treasure, as they pursues the treasure, meets up with different people, and these different people have influences on him, and they teach him little things, and these little lessons he takes with him on the way to find this treasure. And I think that is very much true of our lives, right? I think we all have this little voice that wants us to achieve something, wants to be us to achieve our personal legend. Um, and if you listen, the universe will answer your questions, and sometimes and the universe will definitely teach you lessons. And as this Mexican movie that I saw, and it says, and it will give you a madriza if you need it. It will definitely do that for you too.
Yeah, no, and it's funny because I'll share my poli sci story. I didn't know what I wanted to do after I transferred out of UCR, went to the community college route, and my mentor, she was like, you know what? Take a year and take a bunch of classes in different majors and see what sticks. And that year, I was like, defeated. I didn't know what to do. I enlisted into a poli sci class, and I do remember his name because he impacted my life. Professor Meyer, like this man had a an activity. It was unions versus management, and you were placed into two different groups. I was placed into management, and you had your union. You were going to combat and negotiate a contract, and I was one hell of a fucking manager because those union representatives got nothing. And I was like, you know what? This is impactful because I know with my passion, my personality, if I was on the other fence, I knew exactly how I would help those union workers, how I would benefit society. And that changed my life. I said, I want to be out there helping people, helping the community, coming from South Central. I want to go back and change it for the best and let my people benefit from my education. And so here I am now, still working in community outreach. We both graduated with poli sci majors, and it is about passion. And unfortunately now, and this is going to segue into something else where it's hard to passion and money, because money is such a problem now where jobs aren't offering you things. And I think something that I was told, and maybe you can agree with this, is you have to jump companies, right? My first job out of college, it was in the public sector. They lowballed me. I was making 40K, and they were not going to raise my salary. And one of the advices I saw on the internet was you have to jump company, you have to jump salary, and you have to sell yourself. Don't lowball yourself and say, oh, I'll take the bare minimum. Negotiate that pay and jump around. If you want to be in public service, even if you choose to be, I don't know what majors don't make money. They all make money. But if you are in a company that isn't making money, you're just not at the right company. It's not your passion. It's not the work that you're choosing to do. You shouldn't be on a nonprofit. You should go work in the city. You should literally study where you can benefit salary wise to something that is affordable, livable. Do you have any
Yeah,
additional on that?
you're right. I mean, look, that's always going to be the case. You always have money. They're always going to need, but and this goes back to what I was saying, right? If you pursue your passion, you're gonna find a way, right? Um, I think we pursued political science, but you can't necessarily say we're directly in politics, right? None of
Right.
us
We're
hold
not. We're
office or
not.
anything like that. But and this is true of any field you go to. Once you start going into the field and you start going in and you talking to people in the university and you see what opportunities, you start seeing where to go money, right? If my passion is geology, and I go into that and you start speaking to professors, then you start seeing what what fields are in geology, and then you start pursuing that. And technically with all that, you start picking up expertise, but to your point about jumping companies jumping companies directly, yes, it's true. It's true. I've lived it, and it's definitely true. um I was the kind of person that if I didn't get a promotion every 3 years, then I would definitely jump.
Mhm.
Um,
And 3 years is
but
a lot of time to give a company these days.
yeah, it definitely is a lot of time to give a company. But the flip side to that, truth about that is that you have to have the confidence, one, to do so.
Right.
And then the second thing is you have to believe that you're worth doing it. And three is you have to combat being comfortable. One of the hardest things is to getting away from being comfortable, right? If and I'm not gonna lie, if you're in a position where, hey, I'm competent at this job, I'm getting paid okay, not what I want to make, the benefits are okay, my commute is great though, and I'm
Yeah.
working from home, or whatever's you could do it to justify, you're less likely to jump because of what you're comfortable. um but comfort is a very dangerous thing, so yeah, jumping company directly is one thing, but the thing is you have to be hungry and you have to be in charge of your own career. If you are not actively pursuing your own career, if you're not actively going after what you want, you're going to be stagnant, and that's just physics, right? You have to keep
Right.
in motion. and it is, you really have to keep in motion. And so that might look, it looks different ways. It looks like either licensing, depending on what your industry is, possibly an advanced degree, depending again on what your industry is and what you're pursuing. It could be an expertise in a particular area, depending again what you're pursuing. It might be simply taking up more responsibilities or applying for a position within your company. If you want, you don't necessarily have to leave the company, right?
Right.
Especially if you believe in what they're doing, but you have to keep moving. There's something that has to come in, and it's honestly only going to come from you. There's nobody else that is going to do that. And so that's where that whole personal responsibility does come in.
I would also add you have to notice patterns in your field, right? So something that I noticed right off the bat is most of the CEOs in these public companies, public sector, nonprofits, were coming from the private sector, right? So if you have to make that hop so that you can elevate yourself later on, you have to make that hop. But also, if you think, oh, I want to be a public servant, don't think you can't serve the public working for a private company. Let's say you want to work in health, public health, you go and you look for organizations that are impacting health, like whether you work for, I'm gonna just use Herbalife right now, right? It's a health friendly, company. Technically it still aligns, you're going to make money, and you can always pitch that and sell that once you revert back to the public sector. So when you're thinking about your resume and how you're stacking it, it is a perfect puzzle to what your end goal is. I don't think 5 years out. I think, what is my end goal? If my end goal is being a director, let me see and make sure that every company, I met someone who said, I am never going to work for a company that was smaller than my last. That resonated with me because I said, you know what? Names matter. I tell everyone where I work now, they're impressed. I tell people where my siblings work, they're impressed. So if you see that that is having a positive impact on your life and how people look at you, acknowledge that, assess it, and figure out how to use that, leverage that, right?
Yeah,
Leverage
no,
that.
absolutely. No, there's look, there's skills in any job you might take, in any job. There's lessons that are learned, and you could take them into anything. And you're absolutely right. You have to leverage that, and you have to. Okay, I guess to your point, and this goes back to what I had said. You have to keep building. That's the whole
Right.
thing, right? Y- So when a lot of times when we talk about or when people talk in general, we talk about a certain amount of privilege, and privilege has gone a bad rap. But you have to have a certain amount where you know, okay, I already deserve this. I'm in a different place, or this is beneath me. I mean, and I'm not saying in a derogatory way, but you just have to understand that there's certain things, certain dues, if you will, that you already paid, that you already did, and that now you deserve to be more. Right. And you have to keep looking at that, and you have to be your biggest cheerleader, because it is definitely
I agree.
complicated. It's definitely hard. Yeah, no, I agree. Um, and there was, I think I wanted to mention another different approach, and this is actually something I tell my kids. And for me to approach everywhere, regardless of where I go. We could be school, it could be work, or whatever. We could be friends. We're all going to be friends, but we're still all competitors.
Right.
You know what I mean? I am directly competing with you. I mean, not in the sense that we're applying for the same job, but we are definitely competition. What is that person doing then that I'm not doing? I'll be honest with you. And where I'm at, I went and I looked at all directors, and I saw what their education was. I saw what their history was, right? Because it's not necessarily that I'm like, I want to say, well, I'm going to cut them down or anything. No, let me learn. They're there for a reason, right?
Exactly.
How did they prepare themselves? Oh, they did so many years here. Oh, look at this person did so many years here. Oh, that's interesting. They did so many. Oh, this is the level of education they achieved. And sometimes by doing that, you also see, like you mentioned, trends. Wait a minute, all the executives have a master's. Hmm. Right. It's little
Mhm.
things that you pick up on, or like you said, hey, everybody worked in the public field, in the private sector, before they came here. There's little things like that that you could pick up from doing that. Again, it goes back to we talked about, talk to everybody you meet.
Right.
learn from all those who are willing to share knowledge, and pick up little things from here and there. And truthfully, you could pick up everything from the way you carry yourself, to the way, to your humor, to the way you dress, to
Like
everything, right?
charisma, being
Yeah.
charismatic. Hmm.
No, no, yes, charisma is something that could be learned. Believe it or not, it's not the easiest thing, but it's definitely something that could be learned. And charisma is very powerful.
You know what else has really benefited me? Being inquisitive.
Hmm.
Not enough people are asking the right questions or even asking questions at all because they are scared. One of my biggest philosophies that I live by is you're already at a no. The worst they can say is no. You
Hmm.
might get that yes when you ask the first time, maybe even the third time. So I was able to move up in the company that I'm in now because I was asking the right questions, or I kept asking questions. I was hitting walls when it came to moving up and advancing within the company, and I didn't understand why. And then I started talking to people who I saw did have a successful trajectory in their career within the organization. I asked them what they did. Everyone had a different pathway. I glued everything together. I started my new position on Monday, right? I also did time. I was in the organization for 3 years, but within those 3 years, I wasn't just complacent doing my job. I was asking questions, networking, talking, getting myself in the rooms that I needed to be in to meet the people that I needed to meet. And depending on your company, with how big of a scale they are, you might have options to talk to different departments that are going to help you more than others. You might have a boss that doesn't like you. You need to learn to read if your boss likes you or not, if they have the best interest for you or not, and always remain political. I think one thing that I regret, and you might be better at this than I am, but yeah, you make friends, you have camaraderie in the workplace, but don't be too friendly because you don't know where you're going to be and you don't know the conversations that you had before that aren't going to translate in a professional manner. Now I would go back and I'm like, oh, I should have just been business 24/7. But your personality, you can't suppress that, but you also have to think politically, right? You
Well,
always have.
we always do that, right? In your
Mhm.
20s, you start a job, and hey, you start going out and having drinks with these people,
Right, right.
and
And you
it
talk
becomes,
broken too.
yeah, everybody does it. But you're right. I mean, but you have to recognize where you are sometimes in your career, right?
Mhm.
There's friends and there's acquaintances, and that's something that I grew up with, always, right? Not everybody is necessarily your friend, and I think there's a certain level that you have to keep. I think you could let your guard down with certain people, but you still have to maintain a certain level of professionalism, and be confident in who you are, so that regardless of who you're around, no, no, this is me and this is who I'm going to continue to be, regardless of the situation that we're in. No, I think we do have to be. I mean, if anything, I think there's a big lesson learned in this debacle that happened with
Yeah,
the right. And truthfully, yes, it was, let me say it right, right, it was just wrong. There's no other excuse for it. It was just wrong.
right.
um, but the truth is they got comfortable, right? This is they forgot to be professionals. Yeah, they might have worked with each other for whatever extended period of time, and they got too comfortable and they let down their professionalism. I mean, and fortunately and unfortunately, they showed their true colors. But that's really what happens. You have to maintain a certain level, and they're pick your friends wisely. I guess I could say it that way.
Or pick your conversations wisely in
Yeah.
the workforce.
Well, there's
Uh,
topics you should just never touch in the workforce. If we're talking about strictly in the workforce, there's topics you should just never touch, right?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. If you know you're working for a conservative company, you got to learn to be that have those political, not have those political conversations. It's so funny because now that I think about it, and I consider myself a liberal, right? You don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics, and you don't talk about money. I disagree. Definitely talk about money if you're with your colleagues. Share your salary. I ask people, I'm bold. People are like, Diana, don't ask. I ask because you're never going to learn how to advocate for yourself if you don't know. And if, be respectful. Like some people are willing to share, some people are not, and that's okay. But if you don't make the ask, you don't know, again, how to advocate for yourself. And you are your best advocate. You can't pull anyone with you, but you can use that knowledge that you're, sharing to get yourself to where you need to be. And I don't know if you have anything to interject to
Yeah,
that,
well,
but
it's interesting. I mean, and again, going back professionally, I mean, I think there is a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of benefits and power to knowing what people are making around you, especially people in your position. But if we're talking about advice, you've got to be very careful with that, because
Right.
I know that companies definitely look down on it, and it's really bad because it should really be on the open, right? And the reason they do it is because some people are getting paid more than others and they're trying to control
Right.
it. But I mean, but there are, I think, some ramifications a person can face by doing that. But there's a lot of power in knowing what the person next to you is making.
I agree. And to kind of touch on what you said earlier, that we are competition. If I think I maybe asked you for your salary once when you just got your promotion, and it wasn't to kind of compare, but it was to see what the field was offering, right? I'm like, okay, well, you're working for this organization. My organization is paying me this. Is it time for me to leave because we're at the same place, or you're at a step higher, right? You are who you surround yourself with. I would say that our friend group, highly motivated, highly driven. And if they're not, they're influenced by those that are, right? And so that means we're all being elevated together. We're all being pushed together. And again, in sharing this information with your colleagues, because essentially we are colleagues, right? We're in the same field, we're in the
Hmm.
same education. It is important to be transparent, because if we're not creating change, right? These organizations do not value you as easily as they hire you, they will replace you. And it's so funny. I didn't learn that you didn't have to put a 2 weeks notice until like
You
my
don't have
first
to,
job,
yeah.
where I like met someone who was hired and quit the next day because she got a higher job offer. And I was like, oh, you don't have to put a 2 weeks notice in. I thought you
Just
did.
courtesy. Yeah.
And yeah, and it's funny because one of the best advice I received that I tell people now is, why would you give up the opportunity to make more money today, and then holding off for 2 more weeks? Because I was offered two different start dates. One was later and one was earlier. And she told me, she was a great colleague of mine. She said, "You're making less money right now. Like, that is a job increase. Why are you saying no to money? Take the job and you leave in a week." And that's exactly what I did. And I don't regret it. And it does not look bad on your reputation and your resume, because these companies do not talk to each other like that.
Yeah, I'll share what I used to do. I used to
Yeah.
tell the company that was hiring me that I had to give a 2 week notice, and then the company that I was leaving that I could only give them a 1 week notice, and I would take a week off.
Smart. A lot of people do that. A lot of people.
But you said something earlier. Oh, and I don't, again, we don't know what this audience is going to be, but I wanted to share something that I think we might not touch on it enough. And you talked about mentorship, right?
Right.
You're right. We have a friend group where most of us met at Cal State LA. And we're from different majors. I mean, we started with poli sci, but it's different majors. And we've all progressed through our career after Cal State LA. But I think this is powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because, and this goes back to talk to whoever you have. You might not have a mentor,
Right.
but you might at least have somebody to speak to about what you went through, right? Hey, I'm going through this. How did you approach it? Did this happen to you? Again, how much are you making? Wait a minute, how much are you making? Right? And those little conversations, you're outside of work, and it's people you could trust. It's people you spent time with. And there's no shouldn't be any negative ramifications. Of course, you've got to pick your friends wisely, right?
Right. Right.
Um, but I mean, that's important, and this kind of really goes back to the beginning of our conversation, is to talk to everybody,
Yes.
to right, because that person next to you, it could either be president in some time in the future, but if not, it could just be your comadre one day. You never know. My point it's there's power in that. There's power in communication. There's power in community, and yeah, most of if I think our whole friend group is Latino, right?
Yeah.
Um, and, and there's strength in that too, right? Because there's a commonality there, and there's some struggle that we talk about, and again, we're talking about it here, where okay, this is things that I see in the community. This is things that I don't see in the community or whatnot, and for us, I see this in the community, but from my perspective, at my age and where I'm at, and you see it at your age, and whoever else in the friend group is seeing it at their age and their field and whatever, right? And there's some might be differences in the fields or whatnot, but there might be commonalities that we don't know.
Right. And you know what else I would add to that is, we become that network, right? Other cultures, other ethnicities, their parents have that network that they're sharing with their children. Now, as friends, we're creating that network amongst each other, and we're building that legacy for future
Absolutely.
generations to come. And that's what's important about building, your friend group, your network, and really, luckily we all trust each other. But at the same time, it's like, uh, really think about how you can impact somebody else's life. Like, and to touch back on how important mentoring is, I know I'm going to give back and I'm going to mentor one day, but all of the information my mentor ever gave me, or information that I ever got from anyone that benefit me, I pass it on and I give it away for free because I was given this
Hmm.
information. And I felt privileged to even have every single detail being displayed in front of me, or just anything. I'm going to pass that on because you know what? If I grow, I've already benefited from this information. Let somebody else do it, because again, you can take the horse to the water, but they're not going to, they're not necessarily going to drink. But if I can take you there and you're going to go with it, that's amazing. I'm happy for you. Never going to hold that and or dangle it and say, "Hey, I helped you." No, listen, I was helped with no strings attached. I'm going to help you with no strings attached, and that's it. And you know what? I will say, and this is to kind of segue or talk about, the Latino community. There is a lot of jealousy, there is a lot of haterism here as well, and there's no need to be. I look at, like, for example, the Jewish community or the Iranian community. If I say, "Oh, I'm starting a business," everyone is going to help. If I say, "Oh, I'm going to go and become a doctor," everyone's coming to my practice. We somehow there's a disconnect there, and that is like from like the mother country itself, right, or our parents' generation for some reason. And that doesn't have to be the case for us. We can build something that is so strong. We are the sleeping giant in this country. Let's wake up. Let's wake up and really do something about it and really make change.
Well, I mean, we one of the things that I think we do, that you're right, that we do to ourselves as a community, right, is, oh well, and we talked about it briefly when we started. I'm from Mexico, but I'm from this part. Well, you're from this part.
Right.
That's stupid. Oh, I'm from Mexico, but you're from this other country. I'm
Oh,
from this
you're
country.
dark.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
dark. Right, right.
yeah, and then God forbid we bring colorism into it, and
Mm,
that's just another fucking
mhm.
mess. And what we're just doing is shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Because you're right. Instead of being something that's cohesive, we divide within ourselves. And truthfully, you're right. There is talent. There is tons of talent within the Latino community. Some of it needs to be fostered a little bit more,
Right.
but there is definitely everything we need. And I mean, I think the Latino community has infiltrated every field
Yes.
that exists, right? Up to astronauts or whatnot. I think we have extremely intelligent people in the Latino community, and I think we have a bright future. But that future needs to be fostered, right? We need to fill in the gap, and sometimes these gaps can't be filled in through policy.
Right.
I'm a big fan of policy, but if the more I keep looking at
You
it,
major in it.
the more I look at policy, I see how it needs to work in conjunction with community, right?
Right.
Policies never be it's never going to be the solution for everything, right? And I'm briefly just going to say it. That's why we can't solve homelessness, because we're trying to
Mm,
approach it as a policy issue, and it's much deeper than that. And so,
right.
so is education. So is being, everything that we're touching, everything that we're talking about. Um, it can't be a macro approach. You have to eventually get down and on an individual level and build a community and shore up those gaps. And it's our responsibility as part of the community to shore up those gaps, because nobody's going to do it. And any policy, as well as intended as it might be, is not going to be ever as effective as a people banding together as a community, as a village, if you will, and taking care of our own needs.
Right. It's be the change you want to be,
Absolutely.
and figure out how you can help that change. Like, not just, sharing it, just really talking about it. I know I spent one summer going to my church. I was in church all day helping people register to vote, or helping their children register to vote. I didn't have to do that. I wasn't getting paid. I did it on my own. And I really wanted to, educate the public. I remember when I took a class and I was told by a professor, like, propositions in local government affect you 20 times more than the national, election for the presidential election or whatnot.
Hmm.
And, they have the power to close the street tomorrow if they wanted to. Pay
Hmm.
attention to what's going on around you. And to kind of close this segment off, because we did love having you, but I kind of wanted to ask you, what is the best work, like education or something, or skill or advice that you were given that now being in the workforce you're using and you're optimizing it? Or what is something that you had to learn and grind on your own that would benefit someone else, or that would have benefited you when you were starting off your career?
Writing. Writing,
Writing.
right there's
Oh,
communication. Yeah, no, I'll
yes.
share an experience with me, and it's just branded me forever. When I was still I started working at a law firm. It's like the first time I was like a little bit of a legal assistant, if you will. But I mean, I had maybe like 1 year. This is before I joined the Marines. I had like 1 year maybe out of high school. And this attorney asked me to draft a letter, and I don't know what I drafted, but it must have been fucking horrendous because he came at me and he looked at me like I was just just stupid. I mean, because that was the look he gave me, and he kind of just gave me like, just thinking I was so embarrassed, and he did it in front of everybody. And I mean, it was an eye opener where I'm like, oh my god, what the to this day I don't know what I wrote, um, but it was an eye opener, right? So you have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to write, the same way you're supposed to. You are able to articulate. We can't carry our degrees around, right? Hey, this is
Right.
what I have. So the only way that you could prove your achievements is through your communication, and whether that be written or in the word, and that'll set you apart in any group.
It
You
will.
will have leadership positions by the manner you speak, by the manner you express yourself, by your written word. People will understand your level of intellect
Yeah.
by that, and you don't need to be carrying anything else. That will open doors for you.
It will, it will, I agree, and to kind of add to you, I purchased Grammarly for grad school, and you know what? I'm keeping it. I'm going to continue paying for it, and my grammar what improved since college, but it was hot garbage in elementary and high school because I was smart enough to get by, but I did not retain that. I went to LAUSD, went to school in the inner city, went to school in South Central, and the education is not the same. I graduated, went to college, and my writing level was grotesque. I cringe. I probably don't even want to read any of those papers that I ever wrote.
Yeah, no
I don't
kidding.
know how to pass those classes. But now it's like, okay, my grammar isn't up to par, and texting has, ruined grammar and just the way people speak or write to this day. But when I notice all the top executives, people who are in positions that I want, the way they draft an email, the emails I am receiving, the language, the vernacular, the grammar, everything is pristine. Even the layout of this email that you might think, oh, let me just, write us a note. Good morning, Vince. Hi, hello, Vince. You want to be correct in every single writing you do where when you're in that professional setting. No, that's amazing advice. Like, how did you improve your writing from there? Like, what did you do?
Truthfully, it was just through school, mostly school. But I mean, one of the biggest advice too is reading.
Yes, reading.
You want to improve your vocabulary. When you want to improve your writing, reading's the best way to do it. You do it through osmosis sometimes. The vocabulary, you just kind of absorb it. I mean, yeah, reading. And I don't think I don't know, I don't want to generalize again, but sometimes I think we don't do enough reading. And you're right, I think social media and phones have kind of ruined that and taken away from that. But no, I mean, I hate it because I sound like my dad. Ponte a leer, but it's probably literally one of the best things you can do.
Right,
Aside from all the cool things you could learn from it. Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, so I think if I'm gonna tie it up, right,
right.
it
Well,
all
no, I
comes
have
down.
another question. I lied, but
No, no,
yes.
no. But I'm talking about this particular
Oh,
topic.
yes, yes, yes.
If I'm gonna tie it all up, it comes down to communication. We talked already
Mhm.
about the way you express yourself, the way you
Right,
communicate, the language you use, and we're talking about writing. But it comes down to communication. If you cannot communicate an idea in any form, then you have a problem. You need to work on it because That's really what work is. I have an idea or I discovered something and I need to get this point across to you or to my
Right.
coworker, to the public, whoever your audience might be.
Right, I practice your pitch, and that pitch isn't just selling yourself for a job or a promotion. It is selling yourself at every single thing that you do and assessing that, right? And a brief example I'm going to give is how I prepare for a job. I look at the job description, look at my resume, and I start to intertwine how that fits in.
Mhm.
I prepare myself and I say, hey, this is how I'm perfect for this role. I practice because guess what? Now these interviews are virtual, camera on. I know what I'm saying. I've memorized my script. Writing your own script is important because, again, you are selling yourself. And at the same time, you're presenting yourself with the best face that you can give every single person that you interact with. And
So
that's you never know who people are.
So look, if you're talking about interviews and applying for jobs, first of all, every job you apply needs to have a specific resume. There's no such thing as generic resumes.
Right.
You could have things, but your resume needs to be tailored to that specific position you're applying. Right. That's one. Second thing, if you're going into an interview, right, you have to make sure you have to look what your background is, I'm saying that as I sit here, but you look at what your background is,
Okay, right.
what's your lighting. Look at the color of your shirt you're wearing. Look at the tie you're wearing. Look at the way you're expressing yourself. Look at the camera, the way you look at the camera, where you position. Have bullet points, have talking points that you're going to have before you go in any of that, right? And you have to somehow bring that and incorporate these talking points into it. Listen, you have to listen because they ask you
Right.
specific questions. You can't come into an interview and say, "Hey, I'm going to talk about how good I am at bowling," and then they ask you how good you are at baseball, and you're like, "Well, bowling's the fucking best sport in the world," right? And you have to listen to the questions that they're asking. But if I'm really good at bowling, I'm going to work it in one way or another. You know what I mean? Because that's my strong point. Okay, you're
Right.
asking me about this, but I got to somehow weave it in and point how what my strength is because you didn't ask me about my strength. But
Right. You
right,
have
so
to
yeah,
tell yourself, yes.
you have to maneuver within those interviews. You have to I want to say it goes beyond selling yourself, and you have to prove that you are the best fit.
Mhm.
I had a geology class I took in at Cal State. She's a really good professor, even came out on TV, and I'll tell you about him later.
Okay.
Um, and his word was, "You gotta tell everybody you're hot shit."
Mm.
You have, but for you to communicate that you are hot shit, you have to believe that you are hot shit.
Right.
Right, and that's what I think it comes down to. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a science behind everything, and including interviews and resumes and all that. I mean, things can like that can be taken lightly, and I think that sometimes those are little secrets
Right.
that people don't tell you. Hey, get a resume, get an interview, to apply for jobs, but nobody's telling you. Hey, make sure you have this, and that. I mean, I'm not kidding you. The lighting has to be correct. Hey, am I overlit? Am I underlit? Am I backlit?
How does the top look? How does it translate on the camera? Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Am I bunching up when I'm sitting on my with my suit?
Mhm.
All
Does my
that
posture
matters.
look all funky while I'm, like,
No,
presenting? Yes.
exactly. All that matters because you only have that one chance to do that opportunity, right? Or that opportunity to give that first impression. So then
Right.
it's a production. People don't understand that it's a production. You're on camera. It's a production.
Give me can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. I know my mic just
No, that's a cool
switched off.
mic. I love
Okay,
it.
perfect. I think one thing that and when we're talking about, like, transferring skills or sharing skills, right? What is something can you share your salary negotiation when you are, going from an external company to an internal, salary negotiation, if you have something to share there? Because
So what you're saying, if I'm going from one company to another?
yes, start there and then an internal, promotion and that salary, negotiation there.
Well, starting from if you're going from an external company, you want to know what the going rate is, and now thankfully to this new law, they have to say what the rates are there, right?
Right.
But you have to be clear too because they put you a range, and you have to remember that sometimes they want to put you in the starting range. You're not necessarily They don't necessarily want to put you in the middle range. That's one. And then the other thing, you have to do research. I mean, look, we're in the information age, right? It's not even a word now. I think I'm dating myself. But anyways,
You can bring it back. You can bring it
or I
back.
can bring it back. But the thing is that there isn't information out there that you can't get. So, what is the average income in your area for that position? And maybe that position itself or that title might not be available, but you could research it. You could find it. You need to come in with that information already, right? And then you need to figure out what your assets are. Well, how educated are you? Well, I'm A, B, and C, so then I'm gonna demand this much, right? And and you have to understand if it's feasible too. And then where are you going into? Are you going to a private sector, going to a public sector? Are you going to nonprofit? All that you have to have realistic expectations, right?
Right.
And so you have to understand that, and you understand. You also have to come with two numbers. You have to have the number that you're asking for, and the number you're willing to settle.
Mm, right.
And at least for me, I think that's reality, and I think y- you need to determine that before, because if you don't determine it before, and the heat of the moment of negotiation, you might settle for something that might not have been beneficial for you, right? And then
Right.
the third one is you have to be willing to walk away,
Mm,
right? This is the job I want. Is where I'm going. They're not gonna offer me what I want, but fuck, I really want to do this. I can't. I can't. I've got to walk away. That's one thing that's a possibility. But the other thing is, you know, what is this position going to do to my career?
right.
Can I afford to take this pay for later take a bigger jump, or is this particular position might give me more income, but it's a dead end? Where am I going to go from here? I mean,
Hmm.
you have to take that into consideration. So all those are parts of negotiating. Internally, it's a little bit more. I want to say it's a little bit difficult because um so a lot you get the cost of living increases. You kind of have more better idea of the budget, if they're going to move, they're going to pay, if they're willing to do that. So those negotiations are a little more complicated. But again, right, if I'm in a position, I started this position with a high school diploma, and then I 2 years into it, or I mean, I was exaggerating, I'm at a master's. Well, yeah, I know I could demand a little bit more, right?
Right.
Did you get a
Right.
license? Did you get certification? Did you become an expert in this area? You have to have reasons why you deserve an increase, not just because you're a pretty face.
You know what I would give, what advice I would give people is make friends with talent acquisition because they're going to know what your company values. And I just learned this in what qualifies you to get that boost, to be on the end range of that salary increase or the range of salary that they have. I think another negative to internal promotions or internal career trajectories is most of these hiring managers or HR people, they know your salary. So they're like, be grateful, or like, well, how dare you try to demand this much money? You're making this much. Like, don't let a company, kind of stonewall you with that. You know your value, you know your skill set, pitch it. And you know what? Don't lay all your cards out, right? If you don't have a secondary job secured, be happy, be like, hey, you know what? It's okay. It's a learning lesson. And that's another thing. If you don't get the job, ask why you didn't get that job
That
and
is true.
see if there's room for improvement. See if there's room for improvement because there is something to learn because clearly you weren't qualified in their eyes, and see if that's something that you can improve for yourself. And I started doing that recently. It's like, hey, why didn't I get this job? Like, and I'm developing myself to the person that would get that job, and now I have a job, right? So,
So I'll tell you what I did. I applied for one position, as a matter of fact, the position I'm in now, once, and I didn't get it. Right, and I was
mhm,
pissed. I was like, why didn't I get it? And I thought I was qualified to do so. And so when I applied for it, when the second spot opened up and I applied for it, I went in. I planned. Okay, what did you lose out by not hiring me? That's what I went in, and I went in like, hey, I know that when you hire this other position, I know what you got. You got experience, you got this, and blah blah blah, and I know why you did it. But let me tell you why I thought I deserved it, because I brought this, and that. You know what I mean? And it's something that nobody's really expecting. Eh, I go in with the expectation that I'm also going to interview you, right?
right.
You're the hiring manager, but no, wait a minute. How do I know that I won't really want to work with you? I mean, well, let me see how you are going to react to my questions. Let me see how you're going to answer this. What if, well, this scenario, right? If work life balance is big on for me, and I ask you something like that, and I see you might, oh yeah, sure, but you get this, oh, what is he talking about, or whatever. Well, wait a minute, that might be telling. So there's questions and there's things that are important to you that are non-tangible and not necessarily have to do with compensation, but are important for you to ask. And you know what, you set up expectation from the get-go,
Right,
from
right.
the
And
interview. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know what a mistake a lot of people do? They research the job, but not the company.
Hmm.
I started researching the company, and during that interview, during that pitch, you're selling yourself based off of all of that knowledge and information. And you're going to go to that second, third round interview knowing what the organization encompasses, because they're going to value that as, okay, this person knows what they're saying, even though you know nothing about, being a tech in, radiology, but you did your research. And that's something that I learned as I was developing these interview skills, as I was like searching for jobs. And it's funny because I was given this advice by someone. It's like, and I think I mentioned it earlier, look at the companies you want to work for. Don't look at the jobs. And that changed my mindset. And I want the prestige that goes behind the organization that I work for.
Hmm.
And, that's a pathway that you can take as well.
No, it's true. And then, well, the other thing is that I think is also important aside from that, you have to, in every industry there's lingo, right? You use certain lingo within your thing, within whatever field you're in. I use certain lingo, whatever. Before you go into and you research the company, research the field, and learn some of that lingo, learn some of that, because if you start speaking
Right.
their language, there's a starts already building a comfort level. Oh, he's saying the right words. Oh, he's talking about whatever you're talking about, acquisitions, procurement, whatever the magic word might be.
Right.
Right, but I mean, but you're talking their language, and so you're automatically making yourself more attractive because you're already part of the family, per se.
No, 1000%. And I just want to close this off by thanking you, Vince. I think people are going to really, gain a lot of knowledge here. And if there's any closing words you want to say,
Yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
no. If anything,
Thank
I
you.
want to congratulate you. I think this is a great idea. This is something that I don't think we have. And going back to the whole Latino community,
Right.
this is not something that's readily accessible to everybody. I hope that I at least was able to share something of that was helpful, of importance, a little
Definitely.
bit of a contribution. And no, and if anything, congratulate you for going out and taking the time and doing something like this, because for me, I think this is needs to be out there more, or at least have this kind of media among all the other stuff
You know
that's out
what? And the reason behind building this is giving back to the community as professionals, right? Because we're all professionals on the grind, and you don't have to be Latino. You can just be someone who doesn't have any professional guidance, and you have to learn it on your own. And let me tell you, if you don't have that, ambition, that you're going to be defeated. I think we're both very similar, where it's just like, nope, I'm not going to let life or anyone tell me I can't apply for this position, get this position, move up, and build my resume. But some people do stop. And I want to help everyone, and just like I was helped, I want to help others be the change you want to see, and we can all grow professionally.
Yeah,
So
we all find ourselves sometimes in because, like I said, life kicks you, and you find yourself sometimes where you just don't know what your next step's going to be. And you're right, if this media could help somebody, I mean, again, congratulations to you,
thank
and
you.
I'm glad you're doing that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, guys. We will see you on the next episode. And again, thank you so much, Vince. All right.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye.